From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on March 30th, 2026 from South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. On this episode of The Lede, we look at the final filings for some major statewide races and one big surprise in a congressional race.
Wow.
We recap additional Statehouse moves from last week as we stare down Week 12 in Columbia. And Assistant U.S. Attorney Sheria Clarke's nomination to the federal bench was before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee last week. Also, like I said, it's Week 12 at the Statehouse, which means things are getting pretty crazy up there. An easy way for you to stay up to date on what's going on there, besides listening to The Lede, is to read the Statehouse Gavel at scetv.org/thegavel, where Tuesday through Friday, Maayan Schechter and myself bring you recaps, previews, big and small Statehouse moments, meeting schedule highlights, photos, video, and more. And of course, we're always incorporating some of that into the pod because there's so much that's going on. And we always want to incorporate you into the pod in a non-creepy way. I know that sounds a little creepy, but no, you just have to call 803-563-7169. Give us a shout. Let us know what you're up to these days. Spring is springing. We're talking about allergies, hot takes on spring, favorite flowering trees, least favorite flowering trees. 803-563-7169. Maybe you're covered in pollen right now. Give us a call. Also, there's no wind down because AT is home with the family having a bit of a COVID lockdown like old times. We're hoping for the best. Everyone sounds like they're healthy, but AT is not going to be here, at least in today's episode. So no wind down for us today.
We love you.
All right, let's look at what's on tap this week at the Statehouse. It's a busy week at the Statehouse with plenty of meetings before both chambers are gone next week. So they're in this week, then off next, and then we'll be back with just 15 legislative working days left until sine die May 14th. So it will be zooming. Up in Congress, Congress is on spring break for the next 2 weeks, and the Department of Homeland Security is still not fully funded. Godspeed to TSA and anyone traveling by air for the holidays. And on the economic calendar, March unemployment data comes out on Friday. All right, let's look at what's going on. Filing has officially closed in South Carolina. That's right, pencils down. That 2-week candidate filing period has wrapped up as of noon on March 30th. And we got a big surprise with less than 2 hours till the noon cutoff on Monday. And that is that the Love Gov is back. That's right, former two-term Governor Mark Sanford is back and running for his old first congressional district seat that he lost in a 2018 primary to then State Representative Katie Arrington, who went on to narrowly lose to Democrat Joe Cunningham, who flipped that district blue for the first time in 4 decades. Sanford left Congress with $1.3 million in his campaign account, according to FEC records. And it has sat there ever since, drawing the wandering eyes of reporters and politicos, all asking the question, when will it be used and for what? And now we know. That's right, the last office the 65-year-old Sanford ran for was president in 2020.
This is 2020.
Sanford lives on Sullivan's Island and jumps into the incredibly crowded, wide-open primary field with arguably the best name recognition among the 11 Republicans seeking the nomination, since 1st District Congresswoman Nancy Mace is running for governor. 7 Democrats have also filed, so wide open, folks. But Sanford has the most money on hand among the Republicans in the race. Also, a little context here, Sanford has done this before. He ran and won that seat for the first time back in 1994. Some of you weren't even alive. In 2002, he won his first term as governor and his second term in 2006. But then, for 6 days in June 2009, Sanford was MIA, without his family, staff, or security detail knowing his whereabouts, which turned out to be Buenos Aires, Argentina, with a lover he later admitted to having an affair with. The scandal torpedoed his future political aspirations, but Sanford came back winning a special 2013 election runoff with 15 other Republicans in the race. He also reportedly had an affair with journalist Olivia Nuzzi during his brief 2020 presidential run. This, according to her former fiancé Ryan Lizza, in posts published last year. That's some of the big breaking news for this last day of filing. But on the governor's side, when we look at the governor's race, we saw a 7th Republican Jacqueline Hicks Dubois jump in the race at the last minute on Monday. She joins fellow Republicans Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette, Spartanburg Republican Senator Josh Kimbrell, 1st District Congresswoman Nancy Mace, 5th District Congressman Ralph Norman, Low Country businessman Ron Reddy, and Attorney General Alan Wilson. The first SCGOP sanctioned debate is on Wednesday, April 1st, with Kimbrell, Norman, and Wilson participating. And we'll have coverage for you in Saturday's pod. There are 3 Democrats seeking the nomination for governor, including Hopkins Representative Jermaine Johnson, Charleston lawyer Mullins McLeod, and upstate businessman Billy Webster. 2 Democrats, Jason Belton and Edwina Winter, are battling for the Secretary of State nomination to challenge lone Republican incumbent Mark Hammond. Congratulations on getting the nomination, Secretary Hammond. A similar setup is playing out for the treasurer's race, where embattled incumbent Republican Curtis Loftus is facing 2 Democrats vying for the nomination. Bruce Cole and on Monday, former state Democratic Party Chairman Trav Robertson jumped in the race. And congratulations to Treasurer Curtis Loftus for being the only Republican in the race, means he's the Republican nominee. Looking at some other statewide races, 3 Republicans are looking for the nomination to be the next Attorney General, with Georgetown Senator Stephen Goldfinch, 1st Circuit Solicitor David Pascoe, and 8th Circuit Solicitor David Stumbo in the race. On the Democratic side for the Attorney General's race, there's only one Democrat, Richard Herrick, and he becomes the nominee by default. Looking at the Comptroller General's race, there are 2 Democrats, Tiffany Boozer and Bruce Cole, who are vying for that nomination, with the Republican candidate Mike Burkhold being the only Republican to file and thus becoming the Republican nominee. Former Democratic State Superintendent of Education nominee Lisa Ellis filed again to run, as well as Sylvia Wright. She's another Democrat who's challenging Republican incumbent Ellen Weaver, who is the only Republican running. Congratulations for your nomination there, Superintendent. 4 Republicans are running for the wide-open Commissioner of Agriculture seat being vacated by Hugh Weathers. They include Jeremy Cannon, Danny Ford, Cody Simpson, and Fred West. Deshaun Blanding is the only Democrat, and there are several third-party candidates as well. And rounding out the only other statewide race for the 2026 ticket is the U.S. Senate race for Senator Lindsey Graham's seat. Graham is running for a 5th term and faces Calvin Cohen, Paul Dans, Thomas Keith Dismukes, Pat Herman, Mark Lynch, and Darius Mitchell. So a 7-person Republican field. And on the Democratic side, Annie Andrews, Brandon Brown, and Kyle Freeman. So now is a great time for you to update your voter registration. And if anything has changed since you last voted, you can do that by going to scvotes.org and getting all the information you need to know about that. Or you can register to vote there as well. Now, when you vote in the primary, you'll be asked whether you want a Republican or a Democratic ballot, as you'll be picking which members of that party you want to be the nominee for the position you're voting for. Whoever wins the nomination on June 9th or the June 23rd runoff, if needed, will appear as that party's nominee for the position on the November ballot. We don't register by party in the state, and our primaries are open, which is why you have a choice of which ballot you want during the primary.
Right.
Speaking of elections, the State Election Commission named a new interim director it hopes to make permanent after its first choice lacked a necessary statutory qualification to be considered. The board voted to name longtime Greenville County Elections Director Conway Belania the State Election Commission's next director, who will oversee the agency's daily operations and elections. Couldn't come any sooner. The agency has been without a permanent director since last fall, when former director Howard Knapp was fired in September and jailed a month later on misconduct in office, embezzlement, and other charges. In December, the commission named Chief of Staff Jenny Wooten as the interim director, but her appointment, however, was pulled because she did not have the required years of administrative experience required by law. Belania has been an elections official for more than 4 decades, with a stop in Orangeburg and 34 years in Greenville. His appointment requires confirmation by the state Senate. Let's look at some activity at the Statehouse, where on Thursday, a subcommittee of the House Ways and Means Committee advanced 2 infrastructure bills, H. 5071 and S. 831. They have the overall same goals of quickening road infrastructure fixes, easing congestion in our fast-growing state, and rooting out bureaucratic roadblocks that can slow down construction as labor and inflation costs rise. The Senate passed their version of S. 831 last week, which gives the DOT greater ability to enter into public-private partnerships. It expands DOT's tolling authority, gives the department permitting responsibilities from the Federal Highway Administration for National Environmental Protection Act environmental reviews. It includes provisions to allow counties and cities to take ownership of roads from the state and provides greater oversight of county transportation committees. The Senate also removed several funding components in the legislation, like the electric car registration fee increase and other mitigation fees for housing developments to avoid a snafu over funding origination issues between the bodies. If you're going to generate revenue, that bill needs to start in the House. We've had this problem before. So the Ways and Means panel advanced the House bill, but also amended the Senate bill to the House version. It's very similar to the Senate bill, but just slightly different. So, of course, this will go back to the Senate should that Senate bill pass the House. And this gives both chambers two vehicles to get the priority legislation over the finish line, especially before session ends in May. The Senate unanimously passed H. 4763, which is known as the HALO Act, which would require the public to stand a certain length away from first responders and law enforcement if given a verbal warning. Knowingly ignoring the warning would result in a misdemeanor charge, punishable by a fine of up to $500 and up to 60 days in jail. Senators also deleted a measure in the House bill that required the public to stand 25 feet away from first responders and law enforcement if given a verbal warning. So instead of 25 feet, the Senate by voice vote tweaked the language, putting it at a reasonable distance. Going up to Washington, Sheria Clarke testified before the US Senate Judiciary Committee during her nomination hearing Wednesday as she seeks confirmation to serve on the federal bench in South Carolina. Clarke is a 2006 University of North Carolina School of Law graduate. She clerked for judges on the North Carolina Court of Appeals and worked on Capitol Hill starting in 2009. Clarke served as investigative counsel for the House Ethics Committee, the House Select Committee on the Events in Benghazi, Libya, and as staff director for the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform through 2019. From Washington, she jumped to Nelson Mullins in Greenville before becoming an assistant U.S. attorney for the District of South Carolina in 2021. Senator Tim Scott, who calls Clarke a friend, introduced her before the committee, on which Senator Lindsey Graham is the second highest-ranking Republican. And Tim Scott said, quote, "She understands the law requires not just intellect, but sound judgment, restraint, and a deep awareness of how decisions impact people's lives. And she brings those qualities to the bench," quote. Clarke was part of a slate of 4 district judge nominees before the committee on Wednesday. And at one point, the group was asked about the January 6, 2021 storming of the Capitol, as well as election results. The full Judiciary Committee will vote on their nominations in the future before sending those approved onto a full vote before the full Senate. Clarke was nominated by Trump to fill the position of retired Judge Robert Brian Harwell, who was nominated by President George W. Bush in 2004. He went on senior status in 2024. All right, y'all, again, we don't have a wind-down section because AT is quarantining right now, but give us a little message for when the guy gets back. 803-563-7169. We'd love to hear from you guys. And, of course, we'll be having some changes coming up just because we'll be on spring break next week, but we'll have more details about that in our future pods. But you can always leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. And you can stay up to date with the latest news on SCETV.org and SouthCarolinaPublicRadio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lede, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. Clarke was nominated by Trump to fill the position of retired Judge Robert Brian Harwell, who was nominated by President George W. Bush in 2004. He went on senior status in 2024. 4. That was me doing Eleanor Beardsley on 2024.